You're listening to War for Idiots, a podcast by idiots for idiots.
It's WF5 Friday. WF5 Friday.
It's TGIWFIF.
TGIWFIF, yeah, that just rolls off the tongue, man.
Just rolls off the tongue.
TGIW, I can't even say it again.
TGIWFIF. I can't do it fast. We need longer intro music.
Does it just keep looping?
Yeah, I think so, man. No,
I think so. It's like the 40th episode or something.
Oh shit! Someone's audio's up. Oh, that's me. Every time.
Every time. All right.
I think we're good.
We're ready to start.
Yeah. I'll read the show notes now.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, podcast listeners from all around the world, hello, good day, and welcome back to another episode of War for Idiots, WFI. It's WFI Friday, another Friday night. We hit the airs. We talk about things that interest you, things that interest us. And thank you so much for being with us. As always, we're your hosts. My name is Rich, the Obliviate.
And I'm Mick the Twonk, which I'm it's a weird word, man.
I found those off urban, or some sort of urban site. Don't go there. Don't go there.
One of our listeners is out there going, yes, they used my entry in the Urban Dictionary. I'm kidding. We don't have listeners.
We don't have listeners. And we are indeed the idiots that you have been looking for. And today we are talking about something very, very polarizing, something that everyone has an opinion on, and something that everyone, whether they realize it or not, heavily rely upon, and that is ethics.
Yes.
Ethics. But before we deep dive the topic that has no end, we want to speak to you. Hello, listeners. Hopefully
Rich's phone number is...
It's on the back of the toilet door, and hopefully you're enjoying your Friday night or whenever you're listening to this.
But if you're this, you're a loser on Friday night. If you're listening to this going to work on Monday, you're a legend.
But we are speak to you, and we want to say, dear listener, thank you. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your trust and listening to what we have to say. And thank you for your participation online whilst we record, and text messages and all the other random stuff that we get from time to time.
Yeah.
We're going to come back for season 3, and it's going to be amazing. But thank you so much for helping us this season. But you still can share, tell, let your friends know, continue to engage with us on social media.
If you're listening to this in like 2032,
exactly.
Help us out.
I love how you think the world's still going to be around in 2032. That's classic.
Classic. Inscribe it on the stone tablets as you're moving through the apocalypse land. But
exactly. Spread the word. Don't spread COVID. All right,
COVID. If you are listening to this in 2032, COVID, what put you in the situation you're in now?
Yeah, sorry about that. COVID. Mick, yours. How's it going? I've lost the ability to form sentences.
It only took 19 episodes. Which is a problem because you're the guy who does all the talking on the show. I'm not prepared to carry it.
Oh, God.
Hey, man, my COVID's been going pretty good. This week recorded the 100th episode of the Dead Pressure podcast.
Yes, that's almost 100 of them.
Amazing guest. I won't tell you who it was. But also, I got this cool hoodie. So people should see this hoodie. For those who haven't seen it, it's a pink hoodie that says Reclaimed. It's wicked. It's got a very 80s retro vibe feel.
Yeah, it's cool.
But most importantly, this is a hoodie that's out for the 10th of August, hoodie day for AIM. And I'll tell you a little bit about AIM. It's a not-for-profit. It's an imagination factory that since 2005 has been creating pop-up imagination factories on university campuses around the world to unlock the internal narrative of marginalised kids, taking them from a world that tells them they can't to a world that tells them they can. Kids who experience the Imagination Factory have gone on to achieve educational parity, rise up as entrepreneurs, and take on a whole new mindset that prepares them for success. What inspires our imagination factory are the mentors throughout human history, the philosophers, the artists, the inventors, the designers, people like Richie and I, who have moved humanity forward in positive ways. With the force of imagination mentoring in unlikely alliances between those with power and those without, AIM is creating a fairer world. Now, why am I interested in AIM? Because in Australia, 20,000 plus Indigenous youth have experienced AIM's Imagination Factory, helping to solve one of Australia's most complex social challenges, and that is Indigenous inequality. So for me, this is a hoodie I've been trying to get a hold of. Not this particular one. I was going for last year's one because I thought it was wicked. This one's pretty cool. But each year they release a hoodie and you get to wear it on 10th of August. And the money you spend on buying the hoodie keeps this Imagination Factory happening. And in Australia, it helps Indigenous kids get to education opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have. So that's
awesome.
How good my COVID's going, man. I get to wear a hoodie that actually means something.
I love it, man. I love the concept of an Imagination Factory. What an awesome idea.
Good, right?
Really cool.
Yeah, it's for dreamers like you and I. It kind of justifies stuff, but these people are kind of doing it a little bit better than us. But hey, we'll get there. We're just a couple of kids being crazy.
That's it.
We just got big dreams.
The Idiot Factory.
All right. The Idiot Factory. Mate, how is your COVID going?
It's all going good. It's getting super cold, but everything's going well. Look, I'm enjoying where this is all going. I'm loving the feedback. What I love is that we've hit off on 19. This is our 19th topic for season 2. The topics we never preordained them. They kind of just came to us as we went through.
Yeah. But sometimes we don't even find out about them until we start recording.
but what's cool about it, what the thing I like about season 2 is that it seems like everything we've been speaking about continues to keep echoing through to us. You know what I mean? Like 5G's back, and then they're talking about the China-India border and South China.
Like that echo, I can do that echo for you right now if you want.
But what's cool about it?
See?
Oh wow,
very cool. See, they do. They just echo through. So, but you're right. Like we keep hitting the same topics, right?
No, it's interesting, and what will be interesting is when we hit season 3. What will we talk about? The answer to that right now is I have no idea, but it's going to be interesting. All right.
Oh, we can just do what we did with this one. Just we can do strategy again. We can probably do the Vietnam War again.
yeah, that's it.
We know which ones we'll probably do again. There's the South China Sea's heating up, I've heard, next year. So
it'll be sorted by next year. All right. Well, look, before we start off, we've got to talk about our good sponsors at Good to Go Gear, G2G. So Good to Go Gear is an Australian veteran-owned business that has been supporting customers for over a decade. Military, camping, adventure, workwear, or first aid, these guys have got the wide range that is ready to be shipped directly to you. What you should do is you should check out their catalog. Go to www.goodtogogear.com.au. You will not be disappointed. It is ever changing and ever expanding, and you need to get the best gear. That is G2G. They offer a 30-day, 100% satisfaction guarantee, and they ship directly to you to both Australia and the US of A. So what are you waiting for? Go out and check out Good to Go Gear. That's G2G Gear that is truly good to go. I've been wanting to read this for a while, and it's the tag.
We'll just do it.
That came with this Good to Go Gear shirt that I've been wearing.
The one that says, "Hey Richie, you're a
No. It's been sitting on my shelf for the whole time. I was like, yes, I keep on forgetting, but I'm going to do it tonight because I love it. Right?
Yep.
This is the tag that came on the t-shirt. At Good to Go Gear, we don't expend our energy designing tags that describe our products as being afraid of water or utilizes the latest in hydro nano evaporation technology. What we do is produce quality clothing designed for athletes at all levels. So you have the best and you are ready to perform. We pride ourselves on being good to go. Are you G to G? I love it. I love it. I love it.
Direct. It's very direct. If you know the team behind GDG,
that is so them, right? But I love a tag that clearly isn't just, oh yeah, whatever, just throw a tag on. I don't care about it. Like every detail, you know what I mean, of this product has been thought of. So I love it. That's why I haven't thrown a tag out. I love it.
And you're right, man. Like the Good to Go Gear stuff. And I've got the wicking shirt on here. So this is here. Yeah, there we go. Just get your boobs out, Mick. And what we've got here, like this This shirt is definitely not afraid of water because I haven't washed it once.
Disgusting. That's disgusting.
So
All right, that's all right. That's how people get COVID. Okay, so
not 5G's how they get COVID.
yeah, that was 5G. Let's talk about what we're talking about, and that is ethics. So
Oh, I thought we were talking about good go gear.
the conversation of ethics has generated a lot of interest since it was announced that we'll be discussing it this week. It's a topic that you either have a lot to do with, as in you openly discuss ethics, talk about ethics, think about ethics, and ponder ethics, or you have nothing to do with. But ironically, you rely on ethics almost on a daily basis. And the reason why we wanted to talk about it, and the reason I suppose why we wanted to finish up the season with it, is because we've really been dancing around the topic all season, right?
Yeah.
So when we talked about the nuclear episode, we talked about the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Nuclear.
What did I say? What did I say?
It's nuclear.
Nuclear.
It's
Nuclear.
a Simpsons reference.
Was it funny when they said it?
Clearly more funny than when I said it.
So during the nuclear episode, we spoke about the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, where many claim that it was one of the most unethical actions that have been conducted in war, if you will, but others claim that it was in fact the action that was the most merciful that ended the war, and the debate for that will go on for the ages. We spoke about the ethics of using artificial intelligence and machine learning. Is it possible to have an ethical code against a machine? And should machines have some sort of ethical code applied to them? Whose ethics do they apply? And will they understand how to apply this concept of ethics that is very much a human endeavor? And then we spoke about the ethics when we talked about gray zone warfare. When you're talking about that line between competition and conflict, whose ethics do you apply? And what happens when you're in the competition and conflict zone, but the countries that are involved in it have different levels of ethics? So something we've really been dancing around over the last 18 episodes. We're finally going to sort of hit it home somewhat during this one and talk about what this word ethics means, what it means to us personally. You know, we both have a bit of experience with the concept of studying ethics and applying ethics and pondering ethics. But most importantly, applying it to war and applying it to warfare for the listeners out there who may have never thought about this concept of ethics, or let's say ethics at an academic level. But hopefully this episode will open your eyes. It certainly won't tell you everything there is to know, because it is an incredibly vast topic.
If you think you're comfortable with understanding what we mean by ethics, then you probably should listen.
Yeah.
We won't clarify that, but I know philosophers and ethicists who dedicate their lives to studying it and getting a straight answer out of them.
Exactly.
Oop.
Exactly. So the first question is, what are ethics? A very, very simple, but a very profound question, of which there is no simple answer, if you will. If you were to ask me, what are ethics?
What are ethics?
I would just say it's knowing the difference between right and wrong, and doing the right thing, right? So to me, that's a very simplified definition of ethics. Now, if you were to ask the next logical question, what is the right thing and what is the wrong thing? Now we're having an ethical discussion.
Well, the right thing is not the wrong thing, and the wrong thing is not the right thing.
Yeah. Ding. Okay, play that outro.
Dad's done your homework again, has he?
That would be my very simple take on ethics. But of course, it's a simple take. It's the start of the conversation, and an ethical conversation, a philosophical conversation, goes on and on and on, because there's so many rabbit holes that you can go down. And your background in this topic, Mick?
Look, I have only had a small minor background in this. Oh, sorry, what's this? Oh, sorry. I've just got to move all my ethics books out. Hey, look,
so many books. So many books.
So ethics in their relation to war is a passion of mine. And when I say passion, much like, the guitar I've got in the corner, when I remember it, I'll do some work on it and then I'll forget.
Yeah.
No. So the Dead Prussian, we've covered a lot of episodes on ethics. I think it's the most discussed topic on the show, actually. And I've also delivered lectures on ethics, and also about my operational experience applying ethics when dealing in lethal decisions, right? So ethics is, I found, very, very important, especially since I was serving with people and I was like, wow, we all know what we're legally allowed to do, but there's so much gray in between all of our understanding of what we should do.
Yeah.
And I guess, when we talk about ethics and law, that's the easiest way I think about it. Law is what I can do. Ethics is what I should do for the situation at the point in time. So absolutely love the study of ethics because it's a gnarly problem as well, right? Like it's hard. I don't necessarily like all the complex terms that make my head hurt. But I think it's just it's quite fascinating. I think it's probably something we owe it to ourselves to try and understand a bit more of as much as we can. Now, I'm not saying just spend all your time reading, studying ethics because some of the books, man, like do not read them in bad light. Like you'll be asleep.
It's fascinating, and because it provides some sort of academic context to everything that's happening around you. And one example I'll give you is coronavirus, right?
So it's a hoax.
I've been it's 5G.
Kidding.
Bill Gates hoax. So I've been fascinated by these videos of people in America just losing at each other for not wearing masks. It'll be an individual who's not wearing a mask who wants the choice to choose to not wear a mask against the other people who are saying you must wear a mask for the sake of others. Now, on face value, you'll go selfish person, doesn't understand it, idiot, if you will, not the way we use it, but in the bad sense. And you'll
with C.
You'll denegate that person straight away. But you can, and what we'll do tonight is go through some of the ethical backgrounds that this person may be thinking. Utilitarianism versus liberalism, the values of that person, their morals. And then I'm not saying their decisions are right, but suddenly the decisions aren't just, they're an idiot or they're crazy or they just say it came out of thin air. You can sort of track that thread of
logic. They're an idiot because
of, right. And then suddenly it's, okay, what decision are they making? They choose to do X. Okay, why are they making that decision? What do they hold value? What's more important?
It's so different from my standpoint.
Yes.
It's important to help you understand that, right?
Right. And understanding why people make different decisions helps you bridge that gap because people are always going to, have different decisions.
I just figured out the easiest thing we can do. If listeners, don't do it now, but watch The Good Place on Netflix.
The Good Place. I haven't seen.
Have you not seen it?
No. What's The Good Place?
It's a comedy show that is basically 20 or so. It's like 3 or 4 seasons, and it's all about. You basically go through ethics. They talk about Kierkegaard, and basically what happens is I'll give a spoiler because it's been out for ages. This person goes to heaven. She thinks she got into heaven by mistake. But it's an experiment by hell. And the way they get out of it is by coming to a greater ethical understanding. But you go through these all
the different concepts,
and you're finding out why that each, like one of the people is a ethical philosopher.
Yeah, right.
But he ends up in hell because he was never able to make a decision. He's always able to wax on about the either side of the argument that he made everyone's life so much more difficult.
Yeah.
Right? But each episode explores a different ethical principle. Turn us off and go watch The Good Place, people. You've got it.
No,
don't do that. This is our last episode for the season. You might as well stick around.
All right. So let's break this down a little bit and let's talk about what is ethics? What is ethics? What are ethics? And if you look at sort of a definition of ethics, I found one that is very, very straightforward, ethics.org.au, why we're here, what is ethics? It says, what is ethics? Part of what makes humans unique is our freedom to determine how we'll act. Whenever we make a choice, it was possible for us to have made a different one. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard captures this sense when he describes standing on the edge of a cliff. The only thing that prevents us from falling into the void is us, our choice to do otherwise. So a great introduction. It's about choice, right? So it's when you choose to do something, that choice isn't spontaneous. Let's say, okay, well, what if I roll the dice and whatever the dice tells me to do, I'm going to do it. Okay, but you still chose to roll the dice to be the thing that's going to make the decision for you. There's still some sort of choice in the decision that you make. And that choice is linked to your ethics. Now, your ethics aren't something that you're born with. Some people think you are. Your ethics aren't something that you just learn. Obviously, people think that you do that. They're probably a combination of both, right?
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is these choices come from somewhere, and it's deep diving where this somewhere is. That is the unique thing about ethics. That's what this definition is telling us. Something that's very interesting about this as well is that ethics is a very unique human determinant factor, freedom of determination, that not many, well, nothing else has. And, there is not enough consciousness, there's not enough intelligence within other animals that we know of. Okay, let's say that we're not experts at everything, that also have this code of ethics that make a choice for the subjective part of life, not just purely for the objective part of life. So I think that's a good little introduction to what is ethics for the uninitiated, and hopefully gets you starting to think about what is ethics? What are my ethics? How do I make decisions? Another definition from Britannica.com, written by Peter Singer, highlights very quickly that ethics, also called moral philosophy, is the disciplined concern with what is morally good and bad and morally right and wrong. The term is also applied to any system or theory of moral values or principles. And I like this definition because it brings this concept of linking it to moral philosophy. Because the more I read about ethics, I've read not as much as you, clearly, but I've read a bit about ethics now.
I own them. I don't read them.
Yeah. And the thing about ethics is you can't divorce ethics from philosophy. The vast majority of philosophers contribute to ethical thought. I don't think there's ethicists, and vast majority of them would study philosophers, but just focus on the ethical outcomes that lead to decisions that philosophers brought to the academic table. So linking it to moral philosophy, I thought was absolutely fascinating as well.
You have to.
So yeah, that's right.
Because ethics is basically the doing, right?
Ethics is the doing. The doing has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And
quote me. Put that in Wikipedia. Ethics is the doing.
Ethics is the doing. We'll go back to that Urban Dictionary and put it in there.
Yeah.
So it's a byproduct of human consciousness. It's the choice of the individual. It's these things that make us uniquely human. I love the concept that it's the subjective, that us humans have diminutive. Oh, I got my words confused. It's the subjective that us humans are able to make decisions based off, not just the objective, right? So that's the fascinating part about it. And the thing about ethics is you start reading about ethics, you start to realize that when you try to ask a question of ethics, you only get more questions. There are no simple answers.
That's right. So don't bother asking any.
Well, I think
not like a 3-year-old, right? Like ethics are a 3-year-old. You go, I'm going to do this, but why?
Exactly.
But why?
Exactly.
Because of this, but why? I mean, we still have 3-year-olds, right? So you've got to deal with ethics the same way.
So how do people make decisions? Why do people make decisions? Do people have an inherent ethical code that they're born with? And do groups of people as a collective have an ethical code? For example, is it possible for the state of Australia, the Federation of Australia, for us as a nation to have an ethical code, or are these ethical codes that we have inherited from a different cultural code, which is another aspect, or religious code? So there's a whole bunch of interesting aspects of ethics, especially when you transcend from the concept of individual ethics to the collective ethics, which is fascinating as well. And here's the thing about ethics, right? On face value, ethics seem really simple. They seem really easy.
They are very easy.
Mick, if you want to be an ethical person, all you need to do is do the right thing. Right. But the first question, as we mentioned before, is, well, what is the right thing? Well, that's easy.
Law, feel good.
Right. Well, that's easy. It makes things feel good. The law will tell you what's the right thing. Well, if the law tells you what the right thing is, how come there's so many court cases where they're battling, what law was actually broken, or if someone did break a law, why did people choose and not know what the law is? The law is there, but it doesn't answer every single question we have. There's this inherent decision that people must make that, fall to the left or fall to the right of something that's illegal, something that's immoral. So I think a great example for military practitioners there, right, is the taking of a life. So ethically, right, my values is I don't want to take a human life. That's how I was raised. That's how I've grown up. That is not something that I want to do. Now, let's say if I join the military may ask of me, let's say order me to take a human life, right?
Yep.
So what ethical dilemma do I have now?
None.
Ethically, as an individual, my country, Australia, does not want me to take a life when I'm living in Australia. But they've put me in this scenario now where they're now telling me, for the sake of Australia, you must take a human life. Where do my individual ethics lie? How does this collective ethic apply to me? Which one is now more important, and which one do I go forward to take, right? And now the easy answer is you just follow orders. But as we know, just following orders is something that was tried at the end of a certain war and was not taken to mean anything. So look, it's
no, man. Like
that seems simple.
Just do what the boss says. Boss has got this right.
It's a concept that seems simple, but once you start asking those questions, it gets very, very deep, very, very quickly. All right. So what is the history of ethics? Mick, could you just summarize the history of ethics in about 60 seconds, please?
Yeah, man. Some old Greek dudes in wearing like bed sheets were like, oh, dude, that's not cool. Why is it not cool? Because of this. And they're like, oh, it's totally not cool. And then like a heap of Romans were like, you know that we can do with that? Let's chuck some Latin names on that stuff and make it like a soft J, just to mess with everyone. And then everyone think we're good. And then like this dude, like St. Augustine, he's just like, hey, what are we going to do? And someone's like, what's happening over there? He's like, oh, it's just war. Just war. Just war. Or is it used war? Who knows? And then a heap of dudes in like, pre-vaccination times. So, the US in 2020 were like, hey, I'm a European. Like my daddy's passed down some estates. I got nothing to do. So I'm just going to sit around and think about what's the right thing and wrong thing to do. So I'm just going to do that without thinking that maybe having indentured servants probably wasn't the right thing to do. And then the Dead Prussian podcast was launched in 2016 and interviewed a heap of smart people.
Wow. That was like the ravings.
It was longer than a minute.
It was like the ravings of a lunatic. It was proper crazy. It was proper crazy.
But if we now as we go through and study the history of ethics, the most incorrect part of that is probably the bit about the Dead Prussian podcast being the rest of it is kind of like, we'll go into the Socratic method. He's the 3-year-old. Yeah. He is the 3-year-old.
Yeah.
But why? But why? If anyone's in the military, they've had that boss that always goes, what's the so what? What's the so what? That's Socrates.
Yeah. So looking into the history of ethics,
you'll
find it's not like ethics is not like a car. It's not like a plane. It wasn't just invented on a day, so to speak. It's been something that has been contributed to and developed over and over and over since the start of history, basically.
I thought I said it was created on a day when some Greek dudes.
yeah. On the 3rd of July.
Before July. You lie.
You lie. And it certainly didn't happen overnight.
No.
But as Mick talked about, we can thank the ancient Greeks for introducing this concept of ethics. And it was very much, if you said, what's the history of philosophy, you'll get the same answer. It was sort of born out of Greek, and a lot of people associate it to Socrates, who was the first one who really started to talk about it, if you will, if you believe what you read about Plato, because Socrates didn't keep any notes himself. That's where you start about it. And I love reading about Socrates because, as you said, I can't remember what book I was reading. I've read several books that describe it. It might have been a philosophy book 101 or something. Yeah. And they were just like, Socrates was the annoying guy of the village because he just kept asking questions of everyone, just kept asking and asking. He sounded like, I wrote him in my notes here, he seems like a real annoying bastard.
That's right, it's in the note. Yeah. But why? Or your boss, so what? What's the so what? Yeah, the so what is, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. And people, he rubbed people up the wrong way. But this is, we look back at it now.
Issue.
As we said, from a philosophical perspective and also from this ethical perspective, that propensity to constantly ask the question is now, something that we look upon with great, something that was amazing, something that was great, someone who just question and question and question.
That's interesting question. And the person who asked the question is just sitting there just going, all I did was not listen and then ask a question because I missed the point. And
yeah. Exactly. Unless your question is, can you say that again?
unless you co-host from a podcast and talking while you're sending a tweet and you're like, sorry, dude, I was tweeting.
I missed all that.
What? That is not the Socratic method.
So according to, where did I get this from? Encyclopedia.com. They talk about, so they do make a link about how we can talk about how ethics tie back to Socrates and ancient Greece time. And they say that there was a requirement for this time. We're very formational in what we now know as a modern government, a modern collective, the state, et cetera, that there was some sort of need to have some sort of sophistication to government, to society, to be a statesman and whatnot. And the problem they face, now this is in very simple terms, is no one had training in how to be a statesman. No one was brought up in how to be a ruler or a governor and whatnot. So there was no structure. There was no structure to these roles that were previously unfilled. So there was required to have some sort of moral background, some sort of code, some sort of rule book, if you will, to follow them, to just be good citizens. Therefore, you could start being a good collective, a good leader of citizens. And I came across this article and written by Henry Sedgwick. He describes this in very eloquent ways. This emergent of an art of conduct with professional teachers cannot thoroughly be understood unless it is viewed as a crowning result of a general tendency at this stage of Greek civilization to substitute technical skill for traditional procedure. If bodily vigor was no longer to be left to nature and spontaneous exercise, but was to be attained by the systematic observation of rules laid down by professional trainers, it was natural to think that the same might be the case for the excellences of the soul. Right? It's I've had to read that like a lot of times to try to get.
And what he's saying is like, it's boot camp for your soul.
Yeah. No, what he's saying is, look, if we need a sword maker to be trained how to be a sword maker, well, then maybe we can apply that same method to build your soul through morals, through philosophy, through ethics, et cetera, et cetera. So that this is where this concept of, philosophy, asking questions, looking at life and beginning to sort of think, well, why do we think that? How do we think that? What does that mean? Et cetera, et cetera. Apparently, this is where it comes from. Now, the next step of where we go in this journey it's too much. It's too much to go through, right? There's so much history to talk about who then is influential, because there are so many philosophers that are just heavy hitters. Now, I've read a lot of philosophy books, and there's so many heavy hitters out there.
Like three. There's at least three.
Now, they probably didn't use the term heavy hitters. That's not a very philosophical term. But instead of going through each and one of them and how they influence how we think today, we started with Socrates. We started with Plato. And what we're going to do now is do a bit of a case study on one who's quite influential. Can't. The reason why I wanted to do him is because
Immanuel can't even.
Emmanuel can't even. The reason why I wanted to do him. Stop it. The reason why I want to do him is because he cuts through some pretty Enlightenment thinkers. Kant's comprehensive and systematic work in epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, and aesthetics have made him one of the most influential figures in Western philosophy. So there's much written about Kant, and there's much debate around Kant. And this is the beauty when you start talking about philosophy, where the core value of philosophy is question everything. You're never going to go. Yeah. No one's going to go, oh yeah, this is definitely how it is.
This is there's no sacred cows. Like even the philosophers are up for debate.
Yeah. They go, this is Kant. This is what he said, and here are the people that agree with him, and here are the people that don't agree with him. Make your own decision up. And that's the beauty of philosophy. There are, and ethics, there are no right answers. But from what I understand, when Kant entered the world and started doing his writing.
Not when he was born.
Not when he was born. When he started entering his ideas into this area, he dissected a world that was really populated by two camps, right? The first one was this concept of rationalism. So what is rationalism? Okay, it's intellectual and it's deductive. Rationalism or irreligious, irreligious ideology. Oh my God. Okay.
I'm just not going to help you out. I'm just
not going to help me out at all. Okay, here's an example.
Massive words coming up, and it's awesome.
Here's an example of rationalism. Okay, in the past, particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries, the term rationalist was often used to refer to free thinkers of an anti-clerical or anti-religious outlook. And for a time, the word acquired a distinctly pejorative force. Thus, in 1670, Sanderson spoke disparagingly of a mere rationalist, that is to say, in plain English, an atheist of the late edition. The use of the label rationalist to characterize a world outlook which has no place for the supernatural is becoming less popular today. Terms like humanist and materialist seem largely to have taken its place, but the old adage still survives. So rationalist is someone that takes things for face value, no belief in the supernatural, as stated before. It's the things that are there that you take. The next concept or the next camp is empiricism.
Next camp.
The next camp. Camp. So empiricism. What is empiricism? In philosophy, empiricism is a theory that states that knowledge comes only or primarily from the sensory experience. It is one of several views of epistemology, along with rationalism and skepticism. Empiricism emphasized the role of empirical evidence in the formation of ideas rather than innate ideas or traditions. Now, we've talked about empiricism before. Famously, I didn't know what it meant. Andrew Carr, I think it was the first night he joined us on the podcast.
Yep.
He made fun of me because he was one of our lecturers, and I'm embarrassing myself academically. But we have
it's his fault.
We have two worlds here, and what Kant did was he came somewhere in the middle, and he kind of said, "Look,
he's a fence sitter.
He's a fence sitter. He's a bit like me, right? Rationalism, some good concepts from there. Empiricism." Again, some good concepts from there, but what I've got is a different concept that's somewhere in the middle. And he divided the camp. And of course, when he divided the camp, many people started to argue with him. It's a very complex argument. There's lots of it, so we're not going to even start to go to it.
I mean, he's called empirationalism, is what he created.
And and some people call it Kantianism.
It's called Kant.
Well, people call it Kantianism. But what comes from Kantianism is something that's very relevant to ethics. And you mentioned this when we talked about this episode the other day, Mick, and that is deontology.
Deontology,
which is going to be the next topic that we'll speak of. But wait, before we do talk about deontology, let's talk about some people that have been supporting this show for the vast majority of season 2.
Yep.
And that is the good guys and girls, our good friends at the Extra Specialist Group.
I thought you were going to mention our mums.
Since 2017, these guys, the Extra Specialists, have been connecting Australian veterans to the entertainment industry through their consultancy, agency, productions, and training. The Extra Specialists have been changing the face of television and movies, putting those faces like you see here, of those who are served onto the big screen and into your homes. They've worked with the big names, Marvel, Touchstone, Netflix, Stan, and much more. Extra Specialist is a place to go if you want to get into the industry. So if you have extra specialist skills or you want to learn some, then reach out to the Extra Specialist Group and get started now. Go to their website, check them out, sign up today, www.extraspecialist.com. These guys are awesome. I highly recommend following them on Facebook. They got some really cool videos. And just in the news this week, people would have seen that the latest roll of Marvel movies have started production again. We all know that those movies are made in Australia. So if you want to get hooked up, a way you can do that is through the Extra Specialist Group. If you see any DC movies being shaped, don't go anywhere near them. You don't want to be near those movies. Not good. Not good.
You're an Emmanuel Kant. That's what you are.
Not good.
I just wanted to make a small announcement. I am spending the off season with Extra Specialists in a film.
Really?
No, but I'd love to.
Good. All right.
It'd be amazing, don't you think?
That's not the way you do it. Okay. So, deontology. What is deontology? Well, this stems from Kant, and we'll come back to him in a minute. According to lexico.com, which is actually quite a good page that I stumbled across that talks about deontology. When they talk about it from a philosophical perspective, they say that deontology is the study of nature, of the nature of duty and obligation. While both deontologists and utilitarians are rule followers, deontology explicitly stresses duty and intention rather than outcome, whereas the ultimate focus of utilitarianism is on consequences.
Yeah.
Might seem a bit confusing. but it is about the duty. And when we talk about duty might throw some military people because you apply duty to service, but in this instance, it's duty to the higher cause. Yeah. That could be the state's cause, a religious cause, some sort of higher organization. It is the sacredness of that duty when you make a decision that's most important, not the outcome of the decision that you're about to make.
Yeah, it's pronounced duty.
So Kant spoke specifically about this. I stumbled across this on eip.utm.edu. You might have to put that.
I'll put the link up there. I mean, I'm pretty
and he spoke about it in 3 ways. So I'll read these out verbatim. And he calls these categorical imperatives, right? So 1, act only according to that maxim. He'll use that word a lot. That maxim by which you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. What is he saying there?
What?
I know, right? Act only according to that maxim by which you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. So only do what you think the rest of the universe should do. Only do what you think should be a universal law for what should be done. Okay. Act as though the maxim of your actions, whereby your will become a universal law of nature.
Do unto others as you've done unto you. This is like,
so that's it. Whatever you do must be the same as what you want everyone else in the universe to do. Yeah. This is number 3 now. Act so that you treat humanity, whether it is in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only. So whatever decision you make, not only do you want universally applied, it must be for the good of the universe. It must be for the good of humanity writ large, not just the individual, not just you, not just your friend. Now that's important. Okay.
And don't be a dick. I think it's translated as don't be a dick.
No. So it's important because in instances, he's saying you should be a dick, right? But if only it is for the better of humanity. And I'll explain that in a minute because this blew my mind when I stumbled across it. So basic summary. So he's often compared to John Stuart Mill, who's another famous philosopher that I greatly adore. And this quote is from cesis.edu, where they talk about Kantian ethics. So Kant, unlike Mill, believed that certain types of actions, including murder, theft, and lying, were absolutely prohibited. Okay, right? Even in the cases where actions would bring about more happiness than the alternative. And I'm just going to say that again, even in the cases where murder, theft, and lying would bring about more happiness than not murdering, thieving, or lying, he said that your duty is to not do it. So for Kantians, there are 2 questions that we must ask ourselves whenever we decide to act. 1, can I rationally will that everyone act as I promised to act? That's the first one we went through before. If the answer is no, then you do not perform the act. 2, do my actions respect the goals of human beings rather than merely using them for my own purposes? Again, if the answer is no, then we must not act. And he believed that these questions were equivalent. All right. So it seems pretty straightforward. Okay. But when I first stumbled across an example of Kantian thought, it was in a philosophy book, and they said, okay, and this is where we start going to moral dilemmas. Mick, I'll use you.
Yeah.
If
you mentioned John Stuart Mill. 2 things to read: On Liberty by John Stuart Mill and The Subjection of Women. This is a dude in the late 1850s calling for equalate that we still haven't seen yet.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Dude, what are you doing?
Way ahead of your time.
I think I was like, late, maybe it was the 1860s it was published, but use me. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay,
so according to Kantian theory,
7.
If I had a murderer so you came to my house, right? You run into my house and you say, Mick, there is a murderer right behind me. He is why would you say Mick? You say, Rich, there is a murderer. There's a murderer behind me. Can I hide in your house? Please don't tell him I'm here. I'm hiding in your house. And you run into my house and you hide.
I know where you live.
Kill me.
That's a real possibility.
Possibility. If the murderer came up to me and said, where is Mick? Or do you know where Mick is? I'm going to kill him. Okay. I'm faced with a choice. I can tell him where you are. Thus, I'm not lying, and he will kill you, which is something that's bad to him doing. Okay.
You can try.
Or I can not tell him where you are, all right, which is lying. So I am lying, but the consequence of my lying means that you won't die. Now, what did we talk about before? According to Kantian theory, it's not about the consequence, it's about the universal principle. So in accordance with this example, Kanti would say, I must not lie in this instance, even if the consequence is that you will die, because for the sake of humanity, you should not lie.
Ted
right?
Bundy couldn't even kill me, mate. Like,
that just blew my mind when I first read it. I was like, whoa. But the right thing to do is to protect your friend. No. The right thing to do is to maintain universal principles that you want humanity to adopt. Surely an ideal where no one lies is what you should aim for.
this is so specific. I want listeners to know that Richie is giving himself a pre-Levi.
Oh, it's fantastic. So I thought that was fascinating,
It's,
right?
it's insane when you think about it, though, right? Like,
It really is. It really is.
oh, I'm not lying for the greater good. I'm telling the truth for the greater good.
Yeah.
Because the greater good is not, well, and do not ever quote me on this, but in this scenario, this fake scenario where somehow a killer is able to get past this,
Yeah.
but the greater good's not actually my life. The greater good is an honest society.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and then they relate this to Robin Hood. So there's Kantian views
I've heard of him.
on the Robin Hood problem, right? And I'll read this out. This is from Ethics Project. That's a massive webpage.
I'll chuck it up.
Thank you.
It's, listeners who don't subscribe to our YouTube page, just jump on the YouTube chat and you can find all our links. We would chuck them in other show notes, but I can't be asked.
That's right. So what would Kant do with Robin Hood? Well, according to this, Kant, unlike Bentham, who's another famous philosopher he argues against, would give he would give Robin Hood to the authorities, as robbing is a morally bad action, no matter the intentions. Kant would not look at the situation as a whole and would not take into account the overall pain and overall pleasure caused by the action. He would only look at the action itself, which normally is considered as a bad or morally wrong thing to do. He argues that if it is right for one man to rob, it should be right for anyone to rob, as the action should be considered alone, and the circumstances cannot change how the moral action is.
Mate, I'm okay with that because we steal like an hour of people's time every Friday night.
Steal. Yes, we do. Again, so let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about the actions that people make with these masks, right? So you would have seen this.
The Karens.
Right.
We're not going to do that because we don't upset people whose names.
No, and you know, I've been using that term with my wife, and she has set me straight with regards to why it's not a great term to use, so I don't use it anymore.
Yeah.
But so I watched a video of a woman at Bunnings, and and then they interviewed her on Carl Stefanovic interviewed her and lost it, but she said something interesting that reminded me of this. She said that. She said many things, but one of the things that stuck out was that she believes in choice. Now, let's apply Kantian theory to that. She believes that the most important part of humanity is that individuals need to have choice, libertarianism, that it is about the individual and how the individual should live their lives. Now, the right thing to do universally is to protect a person's right to choose. So when someone is telling her, you must wear this mask, she wants to maintain the ability to choose not to, based off her own sort of health stuff. Now, again, I don't agree with this choice, so please don't burn me to a stake. But it just reminded me of this because it's so confronting when people first see it and you're like, she's crazy, she's a witch, she's wicked, blah, blah, blah. There is, you know, some sort of explanation to where that thought may have came from, and it very much aligns to this Kantian view of the world. And, you know, the reason why we didn't want to do every person that spoke about ethics or philosophy from the start of time, we just wanted to focus on Kantian and Immanuel Kant, because it's fascinating because some of the stuff that he wrote about hundreds of years ago is so relevant today. And the debates he was having, we're still having the same debates today. What's more important, the collective or the individual? Choice or following the rules? Who's going to kill Mick Cook? I'll tell you where he is. You know, these are the things that everyone needs to know.
No, but can we go back? Can we go back to that question on who? Like, if any listeners know, just write into the show.
So what do you think, mate? What do you think about this theory? Were you familiar with it? Does it shock you? Does it not shock you?
Does it rock me?
Does it rock you?
It does. Doesn't shock me. It does rock me. This is what I'm talking about. Like, no matter how much you read about it, and this is why ethics is hard to apply, man. Right? Because the argument, each situation is different, doesn't apply for Kant.
Yeah.
You go, oh man, but context. He's like, no.
Yeah. No context. No
Like
context.
that life is about context. No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm done. He's like the opposite of the annoying Socrates, right? Like, you can't have a conversation with this man to justify anything you've done, because he's so like. I would just love to see how he lived his life, right? Like, hey, should you do that? Did you steal that cookie? But yeah, I find it the whole utilitarian versus deontological approach, mate. Like, just
yeah, big time.
People often have heard the ends justify the means, and that often torture is the example used in that debate.
Great example.
Torture. Whereas most of us probably wouldn't torture someone, but because it's bad, right? And also because it's been proven that it's actually not that effective. But if you're using I wouldn't use torture because it's not that effective approach, then there's probably some more questions you should be asking yourself.
Yeah.
And Immanuel Kant is probably the person you should use to ask those questions of yourself.
And here's the interesting thing about it. He's not stating a law. He's not stating a rule. He's stating an ideal. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if the world was like this? Wouldn't it be great if humanity was like that? And no one can argue with that. Right. No one, if no one ever lied in the world, yes, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's just saying, look, how I interpret it. He's just saying, well, to get to that, then we need to stick to this principle that we do it that way, no matter the cost. No matter the cost, we have to do it. And you know what? I get it. I can get why people think about that. Now, I feel that I have the freedom to choose and apply what circumstance I want to apply that to. So maybe I'm not, I guess I'm not fully Kantian. But that's my opinion. But now I've read a little bit about Kantian. When someone does apply their approach, which is no, I'm all in or I'm not in at all. I kind of get now. Okay, well they live to a different ideal.
Yeah.
The easiest thing to do is to judge.
Just to clarify, they should wear a mask though, because they're dicks. But no, like but the best thing about understanding this and understanding the different types of approaches is when you are confronted by someone with a completely different viewpoint.
Exactly.
Understanding their way is understanding their viewpoint, or understanding possible models for how mental models they might be using, or moral models, ethical models they may be using to make those choices, can help you de-escalate the situation. And it makes it tough, because we know Bunnings workers aren't taught different ethical mental models as part of their training. Like I know people who work at Bunnings, and I ask them regularly, hey, have you guys covered different ethical mental models as part of your workplace training? And they say, no, it's a hardware shop, Mick. But
get out of my house. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they say that a lot. But the I mean, I don't know them, so it's probably a good reason. But then you look at how they Bunnings, for those international listeners, is a big hardware store in Australia. It's basically a big shed where you buy stuff. And that's where a lot of the anti-maskers in Australia have been going out and beasting people. But it's hard for those people because they're not confronted with look, here's someone who's obviously got a different ethical standpoint. They're confronted by someone who's trying to cough in their face.
Yeah.
So it's very, very different. And then how that situation is resolved using the law. It's not resolved using an ethical discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
And so understanding where your ethical standpoint sits within the law is also important, because then, as a law-abiding citizen, which hopefully most of our listeners are, because then that leaves room for us to not be, then you can understand where you sit within the societal expectations and society's ethics. We haven't even talked about war yet, man.
I know. Okay, so let's talk about war.
War's where people fight.
We sort of mentioned at the very start of it, and war and warfare and everything we spoke about this season got us to this episode. But war is really where the ultimate conflict of ethics occurs, right? unethical behavior, unethical decisions, unethical actions is where war is probably its most popularized. But often people don't think about the journey that it would have taken the individuals to get to the circumstance where they have to do that. We spoke about it before. You have a certain moral code, but what happens when you are required to adjust your moral code to go into war? This is a tactical conflict, if you will. This is a debate that the individual needs to have.
Yeah.
We're not going to go into that because that's a very personal thing.
That's an onion, man. That's just layers.
It's deep, man. It's really deep. It's really deep. But what we're interested in is, well, let's bring that up to the statecraft level. What happens when a state decides to go to war, right? So how does a collective of people, now noting that states haven't been around for the entire history of humans, most of it, but how does a collective decide that the next move for their country to take is to apply violence, danger, kill, maim, and destroy another state? As a collective, they are going to do immoral acts, unethical things, which is essentially what war is, right? On the high end spectrum of war. And here's the ironic thing. The vast majority of wars are not fought because they despise the other person, because they hate the other person, because the pure state just wants the other state dead. That's why we're fighting this war. Hatred doesn't have much to do with war or with the initiation of war. Hatred is a byproduct of once you decide to declare war, you then hate the other person that you're about to fight. Often it helps the soldiers get into it, but it's not the catalyst, right? And again, Thucydides is probably the best example of this. Thucydides, there was no hatred there. There was just statecraft, and there was tough decisions that needed to be made. Fear, honor, interest. There wasn't fear, honor, interest.
The whole Peloponnesian War are pretty much the same culture fighting each other.
Yes, right. Yes. And so how does a state decide to go to war, decide to do something completely unethical for something?
And how many people in the state make that decision?
Exactly, right?
We know in Australia, the populace doesn't get a vote. The government decides.
Exactly. And when we spoke about strategy a few episodes ago, I was reminded of oh my God, what good is grand strategy by Hal Brands, when he mentions, he doesn't use the word ludicrous, but he speaks about when George Bush announced his strategy of democracy. We're going to war for democracy. He's just like, how are you going to war for a political ideal? Like, how are we going to decide to commit lives and take lives for a thinking of politics? It's such a strange sort of thing when you.
Oh, you're not talking about Ludacris, the hip hop guy. Got it.
Not yet. That's Saturday nights. So we come across this concept, which is just war theory, as Mick mentioned in his minute-long tirade earlier on in this episode. So what is just war theory? Just war theory is a doctrine, also referred to as a tradition of military ethics, studied by military leaders, theologians, ethicists, and policy makers. The purpose of this doctrine is to ensure war is morally justifiable through a series of criteria, all of which must be met for a war to be considered justified. Now, that's a modern take on just war theory. It didn't get written and look like this. This is where the world has developed to in a modern era, and just war extends back as far as Socrates. Again, as long as groups of people have been conducting war, people have been asking themselves whether this is the right decision to do, whether it is a just war.
I've got a book here called The Ethics of War.
Yep,
and it's got just war from ancient origins to the conquistadors, just war of the of Eastern Christians in the Holy War of the Crusaders. It's also got the ethics of war, the Judaic perspective, just war in the Mahabharata, which is a Hindi text. It's got just war in Islamic tradition. So we know that it was Christian philosophers that gave it the name. Augustine of Hippo, Thomas Aquinas, and developed the tradition. But we know that the concept of just war, it's like, it's a universal human principle almost,
Exactly.
Is this the right thing to do?
Exactly. And it links back to the very start of the show. What is ethics about? It's about choice.
Yeah.
And when war is on the table,
It's a doing thing.
It's a very difficult choice.
It's a choosing thing.
It's a choosing thing. Thank you for using scientific language. And in this instance, just war theory is an attempt to try to put a boundary around this incredibly difficult decision. Now, does it work? I would say not often, because very often we're going to go through some of the boundaries we spoke about. Some often we can talk about extremely recent conflicts, of which the vast majority of this was just ignored for the sake of progress of that nation. But anyway,
yeah, I mean, if you look at just war theory, you'd be able to go through it. I know because I've read the show notes this time, guys. But the wars that we've participated in as individuals don't necessarily measure up to this criteria from our national perspective. It's so tricky. You're just like,
right. Now that doesn't mean.
I mean, you could shoehorn it. Sure, you could shoehorn it.
Yeah. You could shoehorn it, and just because it doesn't align, there's many ways to talk around it. There's many.
That means
ways
it's morally wrong.
It.
It
doesn't mean
it's
just morally wrong.
Theory, the be all and end all.
Exactly. And look, when we read through this, there have been more wars before this was in the format that we see it than there have been afterward. This is very much now shaped as a post World War II sort of thing. When we're trying to build this community, this international community, UN, NATO, ASEAN, all these sort of things that make countries stick to a rule. Anyway, whether it works or not, that's I'll leave that for you guys to decide. But it
doesn't.
So the vast majority of just war theory is broken up into two lots. The first one is jus ad bellum.
Jus ad bellum? I knew you'd own that. It's soft jab.
When you say bone, you mean nail it.
I just call it jab, jib, and jib.
And I boned it. And this is all, and basically they're talking about.
It means the justice of war, by the way.
Yeah, the conduct before, during, and after war, right? Yep. So the first one is jus ad bellum. When political, the reference for this, if you're interested, ethics.org.au, do a real quick summary of this.
Yeah, I chucked the link up for you guys, so have a read.
So when political leaders are trying to decide whether to go to war or not, just war theory requires them to test their decisions by applying several principles. And we'll just read them out, right? Is it for a just cause?
Yes.
Is it with the right intention?
No.
Is it from a legitimate authority?
5.
Does it have due proportionality? And is it the last resort?
Nope.
So these are the boundaries that war should
and they're pretty strict boundaries, man.
They're pretty strict boundaries, man. They're very much pretty strict boundaries, especially that last one.
Yeah.
Is this the last resort?
It's the last resort. And also, the probability of success, which is what proportionality gets at.
Oh, and you know what? It's not saying that the answers have to be yes for everything. You know what I mean?
No.
It's just saying consider it. You know,
these are the considerations you need to have.
Exactly. Is it the last resort?
No. We're going to war.
But you know what? It makes sense. It's a good primer, if you will, for jus ad bellum.
Good primer to know if you're conducting an illegal war.
And we just hope and know that people that are thinking about going to war are having these conversations in there, because that is again, how do you make an ethical decision on behalf of an entire nation? Let's put some boundaries around it under jus ad bellum. Right. Jus ad bello, which is the conduct of the war. There are ethical principles that govern the way combatants conduct themselves in the theater of war. And this is something that the majority of military practitioners would be familiar with.
This is jib.
Discrimination, proportionality, no intrinsically unethical means, and following orders is not a defense. So this is very much down at the tactical level.
And like people who, people may have heard once or twice that I was an artilleryman. A lot, the way people call in fire, a lot of the jus in bello principles are actually built into the way a target is assessed and called in, so that people are like, it's a drill, and people are applying an ethical approach without even knowing it. They won't know that it comes from the jus in bello discriminators. So it's very much the tactical way of doing things, which is it's actually reassuring, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
everyone wants a checklist.
And the last one is jus post bello. Now, I've sensed this is in just war theory, in the history of just war theory, this is more of a recent addition.
Oh, it's super recent, man. Yeah.
Okay. So this is about the post-war, once war is completed.
Yeah.
And this is status quo antebellum, Latin term meaning the way things were before war. Punishment for war crimes, compensation of victims, and peace treaties. So again, I use this word 3 times now. These are the philosophical, ethical boundaries that surround just war theory.
Yeah.
And so here's my dilemma I present to you, Mick Cook of the Dead Prussian. What happens when the state that you're talking about going to war with don't believe in just war theories? What happens when their ethics don't align to this? What becomes more important? Your state's maintenance of its ethical standpoint by sticking through just war theory and really progressing through these frameworks and these questions and really doing what is right, or surviving the next war, which is maybe doing something that doesn't align with a lot of these principles, but still going forward with it anyway, knowing that the state that you may want to go to war with, or maybe thinking about it, will just blast through this without even thinking for a moment. All right. And I think that's something that faces decision makers to this day, and is a bit of a dilemma at the collective level about ethics, which sort of just kind of dawned on me then. Hey, this sounds perfect, but most of the people that have gone to war with people, only one side is half following these.
But I know the answer though. To quote Storm and Norman from the first Gulf War, kill them all, let God sort them out. That's the answer. No, it's not. It's definitely not the answer. Do not go, we're the only side that believes in ethics. They don't believe in ethics. Let's murder them. No. But this is a problem, right? This is a problem because different ways of fighting are linked to this as well. So an asymmetric threat, insurgent threat, their target is the population. Often they will kill civilians to try and turn the popular opinion.
Yes.
That is, and then you have a Western country come in there and try and do counterinsurgency techniques, or come in without applying a proper counterinsurgency theory, saying, well, I just can't use my artillery in this village because I will kill innocent people. But your opponents don't think the same way. That creates
exactly
dilemma, a tactically dilemma.
What scale of war are you at? Are you
3 kilograms?
If we go back to gray zone, are we at war? Are you applying it then? It seems like a simple framework, but if you really look at it, now everyone look at this framework. Okay, it's homework. Look at this framework and apply it to 5 conflicts that you can think of from the last 20 to 30 years.
Apply it to going to the shops during the pandemic.
yeah, right. And it doesn't survive contact because it is a framework. It's a paradigm. It's something that would be amazing.
It's not a law. There are laws of armed conflict based on this, but it's not quite a law. And I've got a heap of books that are probably telling me wrong. I probably could have read them rather than just carry them around.
No, carry them around, man. Carry them around. Yeah. But look, that was just war theory. I think it's a fascinating thing. I think it's a fascinating thing to talk about. I haven't stopped you think about why countries make decisions. You start thinking about why individuals in countries start to make decisions. You can start applying, rationality to some of the crazy things you hear. I won't say leaders' names, but some leaders, against the population, they might be saying things that everyone's like, why are you doing this? You could say they're crazy. You could say that, I'm not saying that name. You could say that they've completely lost it, or you could say that you just don't know the reasons that they're making it, because it's for a different cause. These kind of questions sort of come up when you talk about ethics, where the ethics stem from, and very often that's values, upbringing, background, etc., etc. And then at the collective level, well, what are the values of a nation when there's millions and sometimes billions of people in it, and how do you compensate for all that making decisions through that framework. So look, I love talking about ethics. I find it absolutely fascinating. And you know why? Do you know why I like it?
There's no answer.
Because there's no answer and you can't be wrong. You just get to
wrong.
talk. It's my
You
favorite
can't
thing.
be wrong. You can't be wrong. Although I have on certain courses and stuff sat down for ethical discussions, and someone will say something, and you know what? You're not wrong, but that is stupid.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get those, and the thing is, because people sometimes don't understand what ethics are, and the most common one that I've experienced is when people flip to a rule book, or flip to standard operating procedures, or flip to, and we were talking about this before we started recording. Well, I hope it was before we started recording. Otherwise, listeners heard a heap of stuff they shouldn't have. But that's the way we do things, or that's the way we've done things before. I've had discussions where people think that's actually an ethical standpoint. You're like, no, man. Like, ethics require you to examine the self as well.
Yeah.
So if that's how things have always been done, your first thing should be, is that how we should do things now? Why is that why things have always been done? But is that way appropriate now? So you're right. There's no answer. You can't be wrong, but there still is stupid. And I just want people to understand there's always going to be stupid.
Yeah. And look, I think we can all learn from Socrates. I'm probably the first person in history to ever say that. It's in the questions. And when you stop asking the questions, that's when you've arrived at somewhere you probably don't want to be, because if you've reached an answer, and your answer doesn't sort of stem more questions, then you might not have fully analyzed it to where you need to be.
Yeah. If you are down with ethics and you're like, oh, I'm completely comfortable, you're not.
Yeah, I'm completely comfortable because this rule book says I can do something. It's just like, no. That's not the answer.
If you think you've nailed ethics, you haven't.
Exactly. So look, in summary, my summary of ethics, I've thoroughly enjoyed this topic. It's something that I've found fascinating ever since I first read about the word, what it means, and deep dived what it's about. And I'm not even going to come close to saying I understand it. I'm just a student of it. I find it fascinating. I think about decisions and where those decisions come from constantly. I've come to the conclusion that ethics are not easy. And when you think they're easy, that's when you know you don't know anything about ethics.
It's dangerous, right?
It's dangerous. And you're right. In the military and from a leadership perspective, it's absolutely dangerous. All right. And ethics is not always nice and neat. Reality is not always nice and neat. There's the individual level. At the tactical level, individual ethics is certainly not easy. Rules of engagement, laws of armed conflict, it's not easy, right?
And sometimes harder, right? Because your decision-making processes are often impaired, either by chemical functions because of adrenaline, whatever, or external factors. Noise, visual impairment, like someone shooting at you, that impairs your decision-making process.
Yeah. So absolutely.
Individual level, so hard.
Very hard to make it. Because you're worried about your own survival and you're making those decisions and you've been told what to do. And often what you were told to do doesn't align to what's happening in front of you. And you need to make that decision, right? It's very hard. And then you escalate that at the strategic level. Okay, well, what happens when we are representing an entire nation of different backgrounds, different religions, different cultures, et cetera, et cetera? How do you have ethical conduct? How do you have just war? How do you justify what you're doing? It's very difficult, right? And when you think it's easy, that's when I will say, well, then you haven't gotten to the end of your journey and your development and your understanding. So some people say it seems really easy, just do the right thing. And as we spoke about before, what are the right things? That should be your very first question. And not accepting the status quo, and not being a slave to a dogmatic approach. I think these are where we get to. This is what we can take away from Socrates, the person who kind of started it. It still applies to today. And that's something that I have certainly taken away and that I try to do often. But there has to be a balance, right? You can't be the person you can't be the annoying bastard, as we spoke about with Socrates.
His name's Cheaty on The Good Place. Now, don't just fence sit asking questions the whole time.
Exactly, because nothing gets done, right? Yeah. So here's where it's difficult for for people that delve in military security. It's about asking questions, but also not always asking questions, knowing when things need to be done. And this is where we have to balance our ethics, right? And
it's about taking the risk, right?
And when Exactly. But what I've found with ethics, reading about ethics, whether tactical, strategic, et cetera, instincts play a big role. And there's something subconsciously that deep down inside knows what the right thing to do is and what the wrong thing to do is. I'm not saying listen to your instincts, like flat out.
But if you've done your ethics boot camp, if you've looked into this stuff, then your ethics are like kind of like my body, like finely tuned.
Yeah. But when I work in teams and someone just says to me, this just doesn't feel right, I jump on it straight away. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to go with that, because if something just doesn't feel right, then 9 times out of 10, something is not quite aligned. Best case scenario is we look into it and everything's good to go and everything's fine. But you need to trust those instincts, and you get that sort of spidey sense tingling. Again, Marvel movie, amazing. Listen to it. Ask the questions. Don't be just a slave to dogma.
Everyone really good in that sense.
Some really good discussion happening on the YouTube.
The YouTube, yeah, I saw some stuff on there.
So, from the lens of history, if it wasn't possible to turn Iraq into a democracy via military war, does that make it an unjust war? Winning the peace can be harder than winning wars. From the peace treaties after World War I to Reconstruction after the American Civil War, the peace didn't go
well. The American Civil War is not over. That's probably one of the most important. The American Civil War is not over. There was a military and a political result. There wasn't a cultural result. So the Reconstruction hasn't finished. That's one of our big problems. So I think what you see, some of the turmoil in the US now, points to the different ethical viewpoints of the two elements of the US that fought each other in the Civil War. The ethical differences have not been resolved between them. So that's a very good point, Luke, and that I guess take it further. And yet the invasion in 2003, yes, it was an unjust invasion. There's no question of that. The reasons given for the war did not exist, it turns out.
As Jason's pointed out, so you're asking whether it remains just when the original aim of the war, slam dunking WMDs, great political term, changes into promoting a political system for the enduring peace. Great question. And these are the types of questions that we need to be asking. Now, it doesn't change anything, can't go back in time, but maybe you start to ask the right questions that you can start asking in the future. So some really good discussion.
Yesterday's mistake is not repeated today.
Some really, really good discussion by the amazing people that help us build this show and join us on YouTube every Friday night. All right, Mick.
I love having people listen to us because they're suckers.
And they're all smarter than us.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, that's what you meant. All right, sum us up, Mick. What do you reckon of ethics, mate? What's your final thoughts?
It's boring as. No, I think
it's a lot of hard words.
My thoughts about ethics. If someone says, "Do you want to talk about ethics?" I say,
"Oh yeah."
And then they start
to scare them off.
Then they start talking about it, and I'm like,
"You're an idiot."
But, mate, I love it. I'm always up for a chat about ethics. I think it's very, very important, not just in the military sense, which this show is generally focused on war, but it's important in a societal sense. And what I've loved about this show is, when I wrote the show notes for you, we focused on people not wearing masks, understand how ethics are playing out right now. Okay, so, the US, the conflict at the moment between the protest for the Black Lives Matter, the divide over how to operate in COVID is a big thing. We're seeing that here in Australia. It's not just a US problem. We have the anti-maskers here. There's a big protest planned for Victoria on Sunday. Do not turn up. Don't march as an anti-masker. And if you do, don't listen to the show. We need listeners. We don't need you. Because this is war for idiots, and we're the right kind of idiots. But it's important, right? So ethics, societal ethics, personal ethics are important. Then you apply that to war, where you're also legally constrained to apply the ethics of the service or nation you've sworn to serve.
Yeah.
So there's this conflict where your nation and services ethics and desires and outcomes may have to, in some point, override your own personal ethics. Now, if you and the organization gel, like hopefully you are, if you're a military commander, hopefully you understand your organization's values and they are your values, then that's okay. If not, it leads to lots of other problems. And maybe in season 3, we'll cover things like moral injury and talk about that. If not, just jump on the Dead Prussian, the Real Good podcast, and listen to it. But that's why I love talking about ethics, because it's so important it's important to everyone.
Yeah.
Like it's, from talking to my kids to talking to my soldiers, like there's something we can go through. And usually when I'm talking to my soldiers, they're like, boss, that was the wrong move. Why'd you do that? I'm like, well, ethics. And they're like, nah, no.
Yeah. Let me tell you about Immanuel Kant. And they're like, what'd you call me?
That's right. So yeah, Rich, look, I loved this being our last topic for this and this season, because it's a meaty, gnarly problem and we don't have the answer. I don't think people tune into this show looking for the answer, though. So
No. All right. Well, what a great summary. Ladies and gents, we hope you have enjoyed this final episode of season 2, our take on ethics. If you have, start a conversation, tell people about it, get them fired up, maybe throw some speech at them that's going to get them talking about ethics.
Yeah, call them a Kant.
Call them an Immanuel Kant. And you never know, they might write back to you as well. But dear listeners, especially our gang that always join us on YouTube and thoroughly put some great input into this show. Thank you so much for an amazing season from the deep down bottom of our hearts. Mick, do you want to talk about some socials?
No.
Okay.
I will. Hey, look, the season's over, but we're not. Okay. So we need the downloads and we need the followers and we need the retweets. We need them, especially whilst we're off the air. So we're going to take a 6 to 7 month break, maybe longer. So what we need you guys and gals out there to do is to keep the fires alive. Now, there will be other projects coming out of our studio and you'll be able to see them. You've already probably started tracking Behind the Black Belt. Get following Behind the Black Belt. If you don't like me and you don't like my shows and how I sound, the good news is Behind the Black Belt, all you'll hear is Rich and some fascinating guests. So listen to Behind the Black Belt.
Honestly, if you're still listening this far into the podcast, well done. But my sister-in-law wrote to me today, who was so far from any interest in martial arts or anything like that. Yeah. And she's just like, oh my God, these people are fascinating. Because ironically,
it's not about martial arts.
It's not about martial arts at all. It's just about super interesting people that have just done super interesting things. So it's fascinating.
What I love is the way that we work is, on this show, we discuss issues. On the Deb Prussian, we discuss topics, topics, and they're different from issues, right? And then on Behind the Black Belt, you discuss people's lives. And it's an amazing it's an amazing show. So, ladies and gents, this show's winding down. Switch across to Behind the Black Belt. What you're going to listen to is people's lives as they struggle to achieve excellence. That's the underpinning of the show. These are people who've achieved excellence in a field. How did they get there? So do that. So make sure you jump on our socials. Find Twitter, it's at Behind the Belt, and on Facebook, it's Behind the Black Belt. And on YouTube, it's Behind the Black Belt. You can watch the videos, or you can download them on iTunes, Spotify. It's everywhere. Now, I don't think Rich was asking me to promote his show, but he doesn't do it enough, so I do it for him. So listen to that show. And the good thing is you actually will hear me because I do an ad at the end of the show. But that's a good cause. It's for a veterans group that we promote because they're awesome bunch of people. Our socials, please follow us on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/War for Idiots or type in War for Idiots in the search bar. Or you can solve all your problems and just go to Google and write War for Idiots. You'll find all our socials. Follow us on Facebook. Share us on Facebook. Get your mum following us. Get your mum's friends to follow us. Post our link in anti-masker pages. Let us go viral. On Twitter, follow us individually on Twitter. We are always up for a chat. Rich is at Richie_TTT, and I am at Mick_Cook. You'll get a different type of conversation with both of us. And I'm private at the moment. I've gone for a private thing. So if you follow me, I'll have to approve you. That's because last week, as I said on the show, I was going after a couple of trolls. It worked well, but I've had to block a fair few of them since that happened. It was great to see the community get behind someone who was being attacked by a troll last week, and some great consequences have happened. And a lot of the community has pushed that troll out of the discourse, which is brilliant. That's what we need on social media. People acting responsibly. If you want to act irresponsibly, our show's Twitter page is also there, which is at @War4Idiots. Please jump on there. Leave us a review on all of the tunes, the Spotify tunes, the iTunes, the Podbean tunes, the Deezer. I love the fact that we're on platform called Deezer. I don't know what that means.
No.
Stitcher, we're across all of them. Jump on there, give us a 5-star review, give us a 4-star review. If you're going to give us a 3-star review, look deep into your wallet and you can probably spare that extra star. If you're going to give us a 1-star review, don't just piss off and stop listening to us. That's all our socials, Rich. That's all our reviews. And man, it's almost time to cry.
Awesome, man. Well, dear listeners, until next time, until next year, until next season, This is Rich.
And this is Mick.
And as always, as we always have been and always will be, remember that we may be idiots,
but so are you.
War for Idiots is a TDP production. All opinions expressed by individuals on the podcast are those of the individual and not necessarily representative of any other organisation. The music used during War for Idiots is Fireworks by Jazar and is used under an Attribution Share Alike 3.0 international license.